Hello, my name is Alex Martire. I'm in a postdoc position at Federal University of Minas Gerais, Brazil, and I'm a researcher at Laboratory of Antarctic Studies in Human Sciences. I'm here to present the work that our laboratory has been developing on Antarctic archaeology, as well as the mediations we do with general public. I hope you like it. In 2009, the project White Landscapes Antarctic Historical Archaeology began in Brazil with the aim of understanding the human process and strategies of colonizing Antarctica over time. The research arose from more than 14 years of previous work by archaeologists Andrés Zarankin and Jimena Senatori, together with a trinational partnership between Antarctic archaeology and anthropology teams from Chile, Argentina, and Brazil, constituting a joint effort that, instead of establishing competitions, allowed a collaboration materialize in an in-depth and unique study worldwide. Coordinated by the then newly created Laboratory of Antarctic Studies in Human Sciences, LEACH in Portuguese, at Federal University of Minas Gerais, the project was included in research sponsored by ProAntar, the Brazilian Antarctic Program, and CNPq, National Council for Scientific and Technological Development. Thus, Brazil incorporated, for the first time, studies in human sciences within its Antarctic programs. In the specific case of our project, initially, the objective was to study the first human occupation strategies of Antarctica between the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, centered on the South Shetland Islands. Then we expanded the research by incorporating a line of analysis anthropological perspective to think of Antarctica from a larger perspective of macro processes which over time have given it different identities. In 2010, we carried out the first fieldwork directed by LEACH, where archaeological sites were excavated on the Bios Peninsula of Livingstone Island in the South Shetland Archipelago. The sites had already been identified and georeferenced by the Argentine team in the 1990s. The work developed by LEACH is a continuation of Argentine research initiated in the summer of 1995-1996. In the 25 years of development of the studies, we have tried to insert in the history of the region new actors in the speeches produced, highlighting the daily life of sealers and whalers from the end of the 18th century and beginning of the 19th century. In this particular work, combining public, digital, and symmetrical perspectives, we propose new forms of human relations with Antarctica, seeking the involvement of the non-archaeological public with research in development. In a parallel and complementary way, we seek to stimulate the construction of another conception about Antarctic heritage, centered on invisible groups, therefore opposed to that of official history. For this reason, in addition to analyzing the history of groups without a history, sealers and whalers, we also discuss the new ways of inserting the non-archaeological public as agents of these narratives. For that, we decide to use digital technologies as a mediation strategy. To understand the dynamics of human incorporation in Antarctica, we must consider the global context of the late 18th century, in which the presence of people on that continent is related to the dynamics of capitalist expansion. This incorporation is not done exclusively by nations seeking to demarcate their sovereignty, but by companies in search of an economic benefit that is simultaneously exploited by different parts of the world. These companies exploited specific resources, the commercialization of which offered important gains. The distance and difficulty of access offered possibilities of little competition, and this generated expectations of high economic performance. Thus, these undertakings carried out by companies have been expanding more and more in the limits of the known and explored. The incorporation of Antarctica into the capitalist dynamics consisted in expanding the scope of action of these companies. For its part, the exploitation of animal resources also followed this logic. The discovery of new colonies of marine mammals and new waters for hunting cetaceans has resulted in a greater abundance of derived products, oils, and leathers. This caused a saturation of the market and, as a consequence, the falling prices prevailing at the time. To maintain income, companies then had to increase the volume of exploitation, which led to the indiscriminated hunting of marine mammals, drastically reducing populations in the new incorporated areas. This reduction and the high cost of access to the southern latitudes caused the retraction of the scope of actions of the companies. In this way, the capitalist logic itself avoided the extinction of these species, since, at the moment, the balance between costs and benefits was inverted. After a few years, in part due to the overexploitation, this activity is no longer profitable and companies have shifted their gaze to other territories. Consequently, it's understood that the human presence in the subantarctic islands and in Antarctica in the 18th and 19th centuries is episodic and responds to fluctuations in time that are related to changes in the profitability of this activity. Based on isolated historical data, it's possible to affirm that during the 19th century, 3 great cycles of exploration of these austral spaces took place, mainly related to exploration of fur seals. It's possible that these last incursions have diversified the strategy, expanded the reach of exploited resources of elephant seal oil or leather, of fur seals, and various cetacean products. Official history has been concerned with telling the story of the heroes or important men, keeping the common people and subordinated groups invisible through this process, especially the whalers and sealers groups, protagonists of these first occupations. Archaeology, due to its disciplinary characteristics, allowed the construction of alternative history of marginalized groups based on material culture. Until recently, only the remains associated with explorers and adventurers such as Scott Amundsen, Shackleton, Mawson, Nordenskjöld, and others were considered to be Antarctic historical heritage. In this scheme of thought, the stories of explorations are mainly preserved through the celebration of specific events, dates, and protagonists in specific places in space. In contrast, other stories linked to the exploitation of resources were forgotten and silenced. It's worth saying that stories of sealers and whalers have no specific protagonists, nor exact dates or facts of historical relevance to commemorate. However, they have left a large amount of diversity of material remains dispersed in the South Shetland on the continent, which have little place on the Antarctic cultural heritage conservation agenda. From the material culture, the history of these sealers and whalers can be told. Thus, the conservation of these remains is essential to preserve their stories. And the Laboratory of Antarctic Studies in Human Science has been using digital technologies both for the collection of data in the field as well as for mediation of its research results with the general public. As an example of this type of collaborative and symmetrical knowledge, the LEACH team initiated 3-dimensional scans of Antarctica sites with the aid of a Leica P20 3D laser scan, which produces digital georeferenced and colored versions of sealers' refuges in the format of point clouds. This is firstly processed by Cyclone's software, which helps remove noise and produce accurate information about digitized landscapes. Afterwards, the digital sites are transferred to the 3D Reshaper software in order to generate polygonal and textured models, which are then made available in the laboratory's profile on the Sketchfab platform. In addition to public availability, 3D meshes have also been inserted in a virtual reality application currently under development. In this real-time interaction for Oculus Quest, we are working with the scans of the archaeological sites overlaid with scientific information about the artifacts found during the excavation campaigns, as well as textual information, images, and videos with recordings made in the places of interest. In addition, we are placing the excavated settlements avatars of sailors and whalers from the past, who carried daily activities of the period in which they occupied the settlements, allowing the user to have a more complete idea of the human presence in the Antarctic region in the early 19th century. The laboratory's website, which will soon be updated, includes a georeferenced database with information made available on the Antarctic archaeological sites, as well as on the analyzed materials. It's available in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. Our database, produced with open source platforms, include field and laboratory files. Field sheets are subdivided into sheets for survey, registration, excavation, conservation, and analysis. The laboratory sheets comprise individual analysis elements for each category of trace. That is, we have specific sheets for glass, ceramics, metal, wood, lithic, cork, sediment, charcoal, fabric, leather, and others. The database had as starting point the elaboration of a system that would assist in the collection of information in the field, available for use through mobile devices such as tablets and smartphones. Such a system comprises forms that assist in the work of excavation, identification, conservation, and registration of Antarctic sites. These forms present information from other campaigns, making available in real time data that we would only have access to otherwise in the laboratory. This tool assists us in making decisions in the field, making researchers more engaged with excavation work, and expanding the interpretative possibilities available in loco. Moreover, during and after the analysis of the materials in the laboratory, we have also carried out the scanning of material traces using the scanner MakerBot scan and photogrammetry. Some scanned models are reproduced in physical versions using the MakerBot Replicator 3D printer. These materials assist in restoring the collection and are integrated into the didactic process for presenting Antarctic archaeology to the public. On educational activities, the laboratory has been carrying out, since 2016, an itinerant sensory activity with the Antarctica theme, in which visitors are invited to enter the inflatable dome, which has inside a life-size replica of an Antarctica site, in this case the Punta Elefante II site, and artifacts such as bottles, pipes, vertebrae, and whale ribs, all printed in 3D. In addition to being able to view and handle these remains, visitors are invited to feel the cold and wind of Antarctica through air conditioners, listen to the sound of seal animals, and participate in corporate activities on the continent, since the inflatable dome is entirely adapted to stimulate these sensations. The proposal was being designed on the understanding that we are incorporated beings and our experience of the world is sensory. So the experience of sites, landscapes, and our relationship with archaeological objects cannot be restricted to a visual or merely descriptive activity. In this sense, emphasize the experience of the public, we understand that the perceptions that are built about the Antarctic past and present will be multiple, divergent, and dissonant. Our proposal is precisely to stimulate these different understandings about Antarctica, starting from the corporal experience and digital archaeology as a means of interlocution and communication. We are still preparing for all these activities, evaluation actions, mainly based on questionnaires. The purpose is to analyze whether the results obtained during the work are in line with the objectives initially proposed and to verify progress, difficulties, and also to redirect actions in case of need. In this aspect, the evaluation assumes a guiding, cooperative, and interactive sense. Still in this mediation proposal, and also belonging to the digital field, we emphasize the development of an electronic game dealing with the activities of sailors and whalers in Antarctica in the early 19th century, as well as the archaeological excavations that took place in the region carried out by the LEACH throughout its existence. Although games, digital or not, have been studied by the Academy for a long time, only very recently archaeology has been focusing on this theme, viewing the game itself as an archaeological artifact. The project that has been developed by LEACH, called Adventure in Antarctica Archaeology in the Frozen Continent, it's a game that portrays the life of the sealers and whalers in the Antarctic of the 19th century, as well as the contemporary excavations that took place there. That is, it's an archaeology in a digital game. At the same time, the proposal to offer the player the possibility of completing missions in the past and present Antarctica in order to establish correlations between the daily life of ancient hunters with the artifacts found today on the site make its feature into an archaeology of the digital games, since the project itself deals with the collection of many years of research pertaining to LEACH. In addition, the game also dialogues with the public archaeology that the laboratory has always had in vogue. Based on an evaluation form of the prototype of the game already launched, we are collecting public opinion to elaborate aspects within the project that resolve doubts or curiosities relating to Antarctic history and archaeology. At the moment, we have finished the game's narrative design and we are writing the script. A demo of the game for Android and WebGL platforms was also produced and made available in Portuguese and English. The prototype has a playable scenario in two different periods, the beginning of the 19th century and the first 1 century. In the beginning, in 1822, the player acts in the environment as a sealer who is part of a group lost in Antarctica after the sinking of the boat they were on. In this stage, the player must collect resources to survive within the settlement established in the Lima Lima Cave, in the Byers Peninsula, Livingstone Island, South Shetland. In the 21st century, we played with an archaeologist from the LEACH team responsible for excavating the same settlement in Lima Lima. The actions presented in this communication seek to use new technologies as a way to develop innovative possibilities both for preserving the stories of subaltern groups in Antarctica and to help stimulate and improve dialogue and interaction with the general public. The examples discussed here show the importance of archaeology that, in addition to contributing to the preservation and conservation of the information generated by research, explores from alternative narratives centered on sensations, immersive, sensory and ludic contexts, the approximation of people generating interests and emotions. As Cornelius Holtorf presented in his work From Stonehenge to Las Vegas, archaeology has an archeo-appeal which needs to be explored by the discipline to get the public's attention. We believe that digital technology has the potential to amplify this attraction, generating, in this case, inclusive access to archaeological knowledge, above all, transporting the public to places where access is extremely restricted, as in the case of Antarctica.